Oh, hello, everybody. We're coming to you live. It's Pranav and I. We are going to be talking about something that I personally struggle with, which is the proper alignment of these very key departments in an organization and in a marketing team, specifically the content marketing team, the product marketing team, and the demand gen team. What do they own? What are they supposed to do? What are they supposed to not do? And we're going to pull on Pranav's many, many years of marketing expertise to get answers to this one. And I want to welcome Pranav to the stage and have him do a quick introduction of himself, and then we're going to jump right into the slides.
Awesome. Hey, everyone. I am Pranav. Quick background. Have spent most of my career in tech, and both on the growth side and the marketing side. So companies like PayPal, Dropbox, was at a company called Magento that got bought by Adobe and became Adobe Commerce. Was at another startup that got bought by Bill.com. And for the last several years, I've led teams across growth marketing, product marketing, customer marketing. And as part of that, have dealt with all types of sort of org structures between, PMMs and content marketing and demand gen or growth marketing, whatever you want to call it. And over the last couple of years, as I transitioned from a marketing leadership role to Paramark, where we help other marketing teams with measurement, I've also been exposed to how other B2B SaaS organizations are structured when it comes to marketing. So I'll be leaning on all of those insights to maybe hopefully help answer some of the questions that Theresa talked about. And if you have questions, please put them in the chat, and excited to dive in.
Yes, me too. This is just your expertise on this is unparalleled. It is the exact reason why we chose you to be part of this discussion. Let's jump right into it on the slides, because we're going to start drawing some lines in between each of these departments. So let's first start with defining the teams. So I've put some stuff up here that I would say is probably very this is the Webster's definition of what the teams do, but I know in reality, depending on how you're set up, this can look very different. So if we look at these three key teams, which I think you were talking about, these could be like part of an overall growth team. How do you define the teams, and what are they supposed to be working on?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm going to start with, most folks in B2B SaaS probably understand the last one the best, right? Demand gen.
Right. Yep.
Some people will call it growth marketing. Some people will call it performance marketing. Some people will call it demand generation. Like, there's all types of names. But more often than not, this is the team that is held to maybe very quantitative goals around driving, whether it's leads, whether it's pipeline, whether it's, some other way of defining the success criteria for the marketing organization. You also tend to see most of the budget goes to these teams, right? So that's the unique thing about demand gen. So that one is pretty well understood. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. Product marketing and content marketing, I think, are different in the sense of, like, what do they actually do? Sometimes both of those teams are seen as almost order takers, or serving the needs of other teams within marketing or within the broader go-to-market organization, right? So coming up with assets, coming up with one-pagers, coming up with landing pages, coming up with, emails that the demand gen team is then going to sort of do something with, right? So very often you find that sort of a relationship. I'm not suggesting that's the right relationship. I'm just sort of recognizing that ends up happening. In reality, I think the product marketing team, and I had the honor to kind of lead that team at Bill.com for a little while. And what I think is the true role of that team is to really help take every single feature and product from an idea to launch to scale. So I think of this team as almost a GM role, working hand in hand with the core product team. And you can think about that as like, and if you take a giant step back and think about product marketing or product management, those are two very related concepts. They're not that distinct. One team is perceived as the one that is working with engineers and designers, and that's product management. And then you've got product marketing that's working with sales, broader marketing to kind of take the product to market. And so I think of product marketing as more of the strategic function within marketing that's helping you go from, hey, we have this idea for a really interesting feature or product, and how do you go from validating that idea to really building the business case along with the cross-functional team, along with the demand gen team, putting the messaging and positioning, to launching it, to managing the launch, to then deciding, is it a go, no go, right? Do we double it down and scale this? Does it become $100 million business for us? Or, it didn't really work. It didn't pan out. So that to me is product marketing. There's a lot of sort of stuff within that. Content marketing, I think, is the true, what I would say, linchpin in all of this. And many people don't see it that way, but I do. So again, if you take a step back and think about what is it that we're doing in marketing, and yes, we're going to drive leads. Yes, we're going to have product marketing. But at the end of the day, you are communicating with your audience. And what goes inside that communication is content marketing. You could have amazing quantified, marketers. You could have amazing, strategy and positioning and messaging. But if your content flops, none of it matters. So content marketing, and the best content marketers are, true storytellers that can take what the demand gen team and the product marketing team are giving them and come up with something that is so interesting. And interesting could mean many different things, right? It could be hilarious. It could be, a 5,000 word, deep dive that nobody's ever seen. It could be, bringing a customer story to life in a way that nobody has, really sort of spoken in that way. And so I really think about content marketing as the ultimate sort of, for the lack of a better word, like linchpin in the marketing organization. So that's sort of a very rough way of thinking about it, but tell me if you have questions. I'm happy to dive into
I do have questions, and I have questions in even the way that you outlined it. So I love that kind of that high level, the idea to launch is the product marketing. They own that. And I love the way you described that. But even then, the positioning and the messaging, do you think that lives with product marketing around this new potential feature, whether we're going to go, no go on it? And then if we decide to go, then they would hand off to content marketing to create really great, funny language around it that ties into the rest of the stuff that we're creating? Or where does that end in that feature example that you gave? Like, where does that end, and where does content marketing pick it up? Or do they leave it to the product marketing team?
That's a good question. I think it depends on the scale and the stage of the business.
Okay.
I'll give you an example. Paramark, I'm the solo marketer, right? So I do all of these things. So it's very easy because there's no, nothing getting lost in translation effectively, right? When you get to 10 people marketing team and you start to see some silos, or you get to a 50-person team and you start to see even more silos, that translation loss is very real. And so my advice to every single marketer, regardless of whether you're demand gen, product marketing, or content marketing, is the following. If you're not talking to a customer every week, you are not a marketer.
Woof! Whoa, say that again.
If you're not talking to a customer every week, you're not a marketer. And the reason I say that is, it's not enough to listen to gong calls. I'm sorry. It's like, that's not it. Okay. People talk about like, hey, we'll go listen to a gong call as a team. And I'm like, that's like the same thing as like, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like, you ought to, like, how are you going to write content for somebody if you don't understand the user, the customer in a deep way? And so if you're talking about thought leadership, you're talking about brand storytelling, or even SEO, if you listen to all the best SEO people, what do they say? That the best content is written for human beings and is done in a way that is actually helpful. And to understand what is actually helpful, you need to spend time with your audience. and it can't happen in a secondary fashion. It has to be primary research. So why am I saying this? I'm saying this because, the handoff between product marketing and content marketing, or between, product marketing and demand gen, when those handoffs go well, it is backed with like, hey, here's what we are hearing from our research. It's firsthand research. This is based on the 5 conversations I had with customers, not sitting in an ivory tower saying, I came up with these ideas and I think it looks great on paper. No. I went and actually talked to human beings. And so that's one, right? The demand gen and content marketing people are not just relying on the product marketing, positioning, and messaging for that. They're also talking to customers. So if they're talking to customers, they're like, oh yeah, that makes complete sense. Or no, I heard something different. I heard this in my last conversation. What do you think, product marketer, about that point of view? So you can have a real discussion and debate based on what customers are saying and doing, rather than your hypothesis that's on a piece of paper.
I love it. And I think too, I'm going to add an addendum to what you're saying here too. I think you have to listen to sales too, because sales is talking to those prospects, and getting they're getting their own little data set out of the prospects, which may be different than what the data set that's coming out of the customer. So I love that. If you're not listening to those conversations or having those conversations, you're not marketing. I think that historically that doesn't happen as often as it should. And I think that everybody who's watching should be writing down, schedule a customer call. I mean, writing that down on their list.
Yeah, totally. The way that I also recommend doing this is on your main surfaces, right? So if you got a website or you have an in-product sort of notification, you literally put a link there for I don't know, 5 or 10% of your audience that says, hey, we'll give you a $20 gift card or $50 gift card if you hop on with our team and talk to us. That's it. It doesn't have to be 100% of your audience,
Right. And if you do it that way inside of the product, you can also, at that point, you can be pretty picky and specific about who you want to talk to. I want to talk to power users only. I want to talk to people who haven't logged in a month. I want to talk. So if you're doing that with inside of the product, that allows you to be very specific about which kind of customer you're talking to. So I love that. I love that being an inside of the product. It's a great idea.
And to build upon your point about sales, right? So talking to customers versus talking to sales, I think of this as, maybe think about the problem that you are trying to solve with your research that you're doing, right? So if you have a bottom of the funnel conversion issue where you have lots of brand awareness, you have lots of good conversation, you've got lots of leads coming through, lots of demos getting booked, but there's something that's going amiss in converting that demand that's being generated to close one business, then talking to sales is very useful. On the other hand, if you have no issues there, when you get somebody through the door and your conversion is pretty good, but your problem is you just don't have enough people coming through the door, then it's a different question, right? Then it's like, okay, something about your messaging, positioning, advertising, email is not inspiring people to begin the process with you.
Right.
So you need a different, audience that you ought to talk to. So there's no like cookie cutter answer here of like, do you listen to sort of the broader market, existing customer sales? You have to know what problem you're trying to solve with marketing for that quarter and go find the people that are going to give you the answers to those questions.
I find too that with talking to sales personally, that a lot of times they're on the front end of if things are changing in the market. So let's say you are a team that has great product market fit, you've nailed your messaging, your ICP, and something shifts in the market. A new competitor comes on, there's been a downturn in the economy, so people are looking at their solutions and their tech stack differently, whatever that is. The people who get the first wins of that change tend to be the sales team. So I think they're a great resource too, to stay in front of the rapidly evolving marketplace that we currently live in, especially in this, the tech space where we both have been, which changes on the daily if you're not staying in front of it. So I do think that those conversations become critical at all stages if you want to stay ahead of what's happening.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I fully agree. I think there's lots of nuance in the sales conversations that we can get into as well. They're absolutely on the cutting edge. They see, because they are, their primary job is talking to prospects all day, every day. They're going to have more data points for sure. I do think that sometimes, depending on the nature of the sales team, I'll give you an example.
Okay.
If there's a lot of outbound prospecting, breaking into new accounts, enterprise-ish sales, very different from inbound, reacting sort of to inbound sort of demand. So depending on the nature of the team, you might have very different insights coming from those teams. So it's also important to understand the context that the sales team lives in and not over-index or over-rotate on that.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. And also too, I think with the sales team too, you have to, I think they are on the front line. They are carrying the ball as far as whatever we give them in marketing or whatever they're doing in outbound, they're picking that ball up and they're running with it. I think that they're very focused on whether or not the sale is happening, as is their job, right? And so that can even influence the color of feedback that you get back. So yeah, I 100% agree. That can be a very nuanced conversation, and one that, and definitely one that as a marketer, you have to have your context clues radar on. Because sometimes if they get frustrated about something because they're not making sales, it's up to you to pick through that frustration and find out, okay, well, that's because now budget is more critical, and we've added another decision maker to the sale, or whatever pain they're feeling. It's up to you to kind of look for the context clues there. So yes, 100% agree. Well, let's just look to this slide really quick so we can make sure that we're leaving our audience with some actionable stuff here. If you're going through the content marketing bullets that we put here, are we in agreement on brand storytelling and thought leadership is owned by content marketing? I think you pretty much said that.
Absolutely. I think all three things that you have here make complete sense to me. Okay. So I wouldn't change anything. In product marketing, again, all of this makes sense to me. There's some nuances based on the stage of the company and how much of sales enablement is product marketing getting into versus sometimes there will be businesses that have an independent sales enablement team, right? And there's the train the trainer concept, right? So PMMs go train the sales enablement team and they then train the full sales team. So it just changes based on the stage of the company, but all of this sort of makes sense. Yeah, so nothing to add here. Okay. One thing that I would say is I wish more marketing organizations worked as a squad. So imagine if you had a PMM, a demand gen marketer, and a content marketer all working in concert. And that would allow you to have a much more holistic way of thinking about driving full funnel growth. And instead of just, three separate teams with three independent roadmaps, which then ends up being very hard to reason through.
Right. Which brings us to the topic that we don't even have a slide on this, but I do want to spend a few minutes talking about, the ways that different teams can be set up. I recently was talking to a demand gen team that had their own content writer, and I thought that was a very interesting way to structure things. They also had content writers in the corporate marketing, and they had a whole bunch of content writers in their product marketing team. So there was different content writer resources all throughout the companies, and I was questioning, like, how do you make sure everybody stays on the same page, which you brought up before, like making sure it all sounds cohesive, like the same company is talking. And they did something that I thought was really smart. Every 2 weeks, they had a meeting of all of their content people, so they could all be on the same page. They edit and read each other's stuff, which I thought was really smart. So again, opening up to the conversation of how do you think this can be, how have you seen this allocated, what teams you've worked on, and how they allocate the content, specifically the content writing resources on the team.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of different models. So the one that I'm going to sort of talk about most, and I remember this from my time at Bill, and I've seen this sort of replicated in other places, is you have a central team and then you have embedded resources, right? So I was actually talking to Ashley from Atlassian. I talked to you about this before we kicked it off today. And she heads up lifecycle marketing and has marketers on her team who are embedded within each sort of individual squad. So they are the, resident experts on their specific part of what they're doing, but they're also tied to a centralized team. So the common voice, the common sort of tone, the common sort of, writing standards are sort of applied across the board. And I think that is, a model that scales well, is a centralized team, but an embedded team. And you can imagine the same thing working for design and for analytics and for other things, where you do need to have certain amount of, skill set and a bar that you have to cross, right? Especially when it comes to writing and editing. But you do have the benefit of embedding within each team. And I think that's the right way to go for content marketing.
I love that. And I love the idea that you having a strong centralized team means a strong centralized brand governance and all of those things that make it sound like you want the message that pops up inside of the product to sound like the same company wrote it, the case study. You don't want those things to sound wildly disparate, because you just sound like a crazy person at that point.
Yeah, and the point is the customer shouldn't be able to tell the seams between the different surfaces, right? So however you achieve that, but from a customer perspective, it should come across as one communication channel or one sort of brand and tone, rather than three different versions of it.
Agreed, 100% agreed. And it would be so easy for that to fall apart when you even think about the different points of view that we've defined on this slide. If you're coming at something from a brand storytelling, you might write a case study completely different than someone coming from a, feature creation point of view, or somebody coming from a lead gen. So, I can see where it's easy for it to happen, because your point of view in each team and what you want to accomplish, your focus can be different. But yes, I like the idea of keeping that strong centralized presence. That's a great model.
One thing that I'm going to talk about on the product marketing side is how do you keep it real, is through this concept of proof. Okay. So any message that a product marketing team wants to put out there, right, a positioning statement or messaging points, if it doesn't have associated claims or proofs, it doesn't actually stand on its 2 feet. Right. And so that also makes it easy for demand gen and content marketing to then take that and run with it, right? Because you're not debating it. Well, how do you know if that's a point that's going to resonate or not? Well, we have some claims, we have some proof, we've done some research, we've got some concrete data points that we can relate back to. And so that enables the content marketing team and demand gen team to also then be like, okay, well, what about this other claim that we were able to substantiate? Maybe that makes it possible for you to include in the messaging and positioning and the content pillars there. So one last thing, right, which is have all of this written down. Your messaging, your positioning, your claims, your content pillars, they need to be written down in a central place that everyone can align on. And it's a living, breathing thing that should change every quarter or 6 months as the product evolves, as your positioning evolves. These are not once what is the term, like
one and done.
One and done. Yeah, exactly.
Well, I love that, and what I'm going to pull out of that and recap back to you, what I heard was the product marketing team is the team of proof, and nothing should come out of the product marketing team that can't be backed up by real data from the product or from their research with customers or their research. So I love that. And if you make now product marketing as the source of truth, the source of stats, the source of information that you can rely on, and then I love how you describe that, Pranav, then that proof, that provable, those provable factoids or whatever are then shared with content marketing, demand generation, and they're going to spin up their magic based on this reliable proof and truth that's coming out of product marketing. That's a beautiful way to frame it, and it actually makes it easier for me to understand kind of the flywheel of how those teams are working together. Yeah, I love that. All right, so are you ready to talk accountability and measuring for these teams?
Let's do it.
Okay, because you are the measuring. So for those of you who don't know, Paramark is kind of redefining how, I'm going to say that for you, Pranav, because I think you're redefining how marketing teams measure their success. And I can, if you want to go into that a little bit more for people so they know your point of view, but so you are my go-to person for measurement and metrics and KPIs, and that remains a sticking point with these three teams. So I've put up some things again here. This is kind of the Webster's definition of how these teams might be measured, but I want to, obviously share your wisdom and your experience with us on how you're measuring these teams.
Yeah, no, it's a great it's a great sort of topic, and I think it's important to kind of demystify a little bit. So if you and for folks, like Theresa mentioned, go check out Paramark. If you're curious about what we do, I'm not going to talk about what we do. I'm just going to talk about sort of the metrics from the perspective of these three teams. I'm going to start with product marketing because I think that's the hardest one. We struggled with this quite a bit in terms of how do you define the success of this team. And the success criteria for PMM at the end of the day has to be whether the product is successful or not. That's the only thing that matters. Nothing else matters. So if your product is hitting its goals and growing the way that it was hypothesized, then your product marketing team is successful. And if it's not, then your product marketing team is not successful. It's as simple as that. And of course, product adoption and usage is a key part of it. Sales feedback is a part of it. Competitive positioning is a part of it. But the one North Star is the product growing? Is it making money? Is it sort of, getting to that next stage of growth that, again, going from an idea to launch to scale? That's what matters. And everything that you have here around sales enablement and competitive positioning is a factor into that North Star metric. So that's how I think about product marketing. I think content marketing, to me, it all comes down to the consumability of the content. Pretty simple, right? The whole point of content is it's got to get consumed. So I think of that as, again, if you had to define a North Star metric, I would say the total, amount of qualified consumption. And that might mean, time on site, but above and beyond the 5-second click in and click out, right? So you put some threshold in there and you say across your video, your organic social, your blog posts, whatever you defined as content marketing, how much combined usage of that content is happening. And that to me is the most direct way to measure it, because you can define it in terms of increasing the overall volume, right? Or you can define it, or it could be like more usage per user, right? Which can also be a very sort of meaningful number. So if you look at this total volume of content in terms of the number of minutes that people are spending on your content, that's pretty good. And obviously, the metrics that are here, engagement, organic traffic, brand awareness, all of these make sense. I particularly like search volume. And what this means is if people are searching for Paramark on Google, that's a good thing. That means you've gotten people to be interested enough to have an intent-based search. And if that number is going up and to the right, that's a very positive sign. If that number is staying flat and you're growing all of your demand gen through non-branded search, that's basically competing with everybody else.
Right.
If people are putting your brand name into Google and that number is going up and to the right, that's showing you that everything else that you're doing, whether it's ads or whether it's organic content, it's driving people to your brand in Google. And I think that's very, very valuable.
So let me ask you a question. If you were going to put these order of importance, these three for content marketing, which one would you put, honestly, which one would you pick as the most, if I had one metric for content marketing, which one would be the most important?
Oof.
I know, tough. Because I almost feel like what you were talking about with search volume almost could be one for demand gen.
Well, it all comes back to what is the purpose of content marketing, right? So if I had to put something, I would actually put the engagement one, but I would put a spin on it, right? So it's not just like time on page, but the concept that I was talking about, which is, total minutes above for all users spending at least, 30 seconds on a page. So I would put a qualified engagement metric, and I would use that as the North Star, because that's a number that you have direct influence over. And the quality and the quantity of content will directly influence your qualified engagement. And that's something you can set goals around and you can measure very easily, and something that will, move the needle. And there are all these people who will think of that as like a vanity metric. I think that's not a vanity metric at all. It's a very reasonable, very strong, proven metric. They just don't have a way to tie the relationship of that to
Right.
pipeline,
Right.
and that's a separate conversation, right?
Right.
So we can talk about how do you do that, but engagement is got to be number one.
Right. That's what I was hoping and thinking that you were going to say, because I also feel like that one's kind of the truest, shortest line to the content marketing team. Whether it's, I get brand awareness, maybe organic traffic, that could be other things happening maybe in other teams. But I agree with you. I do think that engagement, the quality of the content overall is what keeps people on the page.
Absolutely.
Hard to measure, as you said, but I do think that's probably the shortest, straightest line between your content marketing team.
Yeah, if you think about it, right? If you talk to any YouTubers or TikTokers, right, the way they measure their content is through the retention through the 60 seconds of a short form video. So if you see massive drop off after like 3 seconds or 4 seconds, that's bad. They look at their retention rate, which is how many people are following all the way through to the end of the video. That is the metric that matters, right? So in this case, that would be, are you scrolling all the way through to the bottom of the blog post, right? Or whatever your format is. So the best people, right? Like the Mr. Beasts of the world, they're looking at that engagement metric on a per video basis. That's what matters. So yeah.
I agree. I 100% agree on that one. So let's talk a little bit about how we're measuring. Did we talk about product marketing, how we're measuring product marketing?
I kind of mentioned that it's at the end of the day, it's about whether the product is growing or not.
Right.
So, yeah, but product adoption and usage is number one.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's what I say, because we're all in a go-to-market world. We're all supposed to be pursuing our actual growth numbers, not our net growth. So yes. So I think specific to product marketing, I do like that one, product adoption and usage. I think that's a really good, strong one.
Totally. I think of it this way, right? I have great feedback from my sales team. Okay. Sales enablement is giving us like 10 on 10 on the enablement training sessions that we're doing, but the product isn't growing.
Right.
So like, what's the point, right? So which is why I come back to like product adoption and usage is the only thing that really matters for product marketing. Everything else kind of feeds into that metric.
Agree. I like that. That's a good way of positioning it. Good. And what about
demand gen's easy, right? Like one number that you don't have here.
No, it's not. It's not easy, Pranav.
I mean, I will, for B2B SaaS, I think that the one number that matters is, and people may, not agree with me, is sales accepted opportunities.
Ooh.
And I love and hate that metric. I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
I hate that metric for the reason that who are we to accept opportunities as sales reps? What does that even mean, right? What that means is that you've done something wrong in your marketing, and therefore sales is rejecting a whole bunch of opportunities. So that's the part that I hate about it, that there's a certain amount of qualification that sales and marketing are having to do, rather than, if you take a step back and think about, your prospect should be qualifying your product, not you qualifying your prospects, right? If you really want to take a customer-led approach.
Right.
So while I hate that framing, I do think that sales accepted opportunities is like the cleanest way to understand the baseline demand of your business. And what ends up happening is, for all types of short-term pressures that marketing and sales teams are put through, we increase and increase and increase our lead goals, and none of them are based on reality. They're just based on aspirational sort of goals, and you end up loosening the threshold for quality. And so if you really want to have a crisp understanding in this day and age, sales accepted opportunities is the best bet. Now, if you were in a disciplined organization that is not going to hide pricing, that is not going to go make you do a whole bunch of qualification for no reason, then I would go look at demos booked, trials started, all of those top of the funnel metrics, because if your pricing is transparent, if your value prop is clear and obvious who it's for, then the prospect can qualify you and decide whether they want to start a demo or start a trial or not.
Right.
And they're not like guessing, oh, I'm doing a demo because all I want to do is see the pricing. That's not a qualified lead. That's a bullshit lead.
Agreed. 100% agreed. And I feel like part of the reason why this doesn't feel good, this idea of a sales qualified lead, doesn't feel good as a demand gen team, because again, an undisciplined organization, or that it's so subjective. And sales qualified leads don't have an actual standard. Meaning, I don't want my sales. I feel like, so here's I'll tell you this. I have been inside of teams where it was sales qualified leads were the benchmark that demand gen was chasing after, but it felt too subjective, in so much as that if this isn't the industry that I like selling into, or that's easiest for me to sell into, or whatever. So I feel like the only asterisk I would put on sales qualified leads, because I agree with you, I don't love that, but I think there's a lot of merit in that, especially in an org where you've got a higher dollar value product. So people have to talk to sales first. If you're doing product-led growth at $69 a month, and I can go right from my demand gen messages right into trial and right into demo, that's great. Those are good metrics. But for a higher price point item and at a bigger relationship that they have to have a sales to sell them into it, now sales qualified leads, begrudgingly, that makes a lot of sense. But there definitely needs to be some agreed upon standards, so it's not completely subjective on the whim of the salesperson.
Yeah, agreed. And there's a lot of nuance in that, right, based on the organization. So completely agree with you. I wish there was a standard definition.
Yes.
But we all live in a more complicated world than that.
Yeah. And I mean, do you think that, we have customer acquisition costs on here. I was actually thinking that you might think that was a really valuable one for demand gen, just because, I don't know, like, this is a tough one, because I feel like this goes back to the go-to-market motion that you're using. I feel like customer acquisition costs, some of my customers that are the best fit, that stay the longest, a lot of times have the highest customer acquisition costs.
The reason I don't love that one is, if you make that the goal, right? If you make that the success criteria, you are limiting your growth. Let me explain.
Yeah.
People get so centered around that, right? I'll give you an example. We cut CAC by 50%.
Right.
You might think that your CFO and CEO care about that, but they really don't. What they care about is you grew the business at a lower CAC.
Oh,
you see what I'm saying?
Yes,
so just cutting the CAC and becoming more efficient, not that helpful. It's actually a path to death, right? You just keep cutting. You got really efficient, but you're hardly growing.
Right.
So I don't think about CAC as like a good, primary metric for demand gen. I think it's a secondary or a tertiary metric, which is a control variable of don't let your CAC go out of whack. I didn't mean to say that. There we go.
Yeah, I need to get that on a t-shirt. I think that's great.
That's a good one. Don't let your CAC go out of whack.
I think that's a tagline. A tagline is born. Well, another thing with customer acquisition costs, but I do feel like a lot of demand gen teams and I think even a lot of CMOs, that's part of their scorecard. And again, I do think that can be very misleading. I have, in my own career, I have had campaigns cut because the acquisition cost was too high, when in fact those were our people that stayed the longest because they were more targeted, right? So I
will also say that most people's CAC math is wrong. So that's a separate issue of how do you calculate CAC, right? And this is what gets into attribution and measurement. But once you actually understand how marketing works and how that math works, 99% of B2B SaaS companies are calculating their CAC incorrectly.
Interesting. I think those are probably fighting words at a lot of companies.
Yeah, unfortunately, yes. And I wish that wasn't the case, but that absolutely is. And I can, for a fact, like I would put this public challenge out to anybody, like come show me your CAC, math, and I will show you how it's wrong.
Right. Well, because your CAC is out of whack, right? That's really. All right, we're getting t-shirts made. All right, so let's move on to like, how do we fix this? So we've got our teams, they're fighting over who's supposed to do a case study, which I've been in those discussions where we've fought over who's supposed to write a case study. This is some things that I put down as things that have worked for me in the past, have removed some of that friction. But what do you think of these? And then do you have anything to add?
I think the number of one bullet is absolutely vital. I don't know if everybody does this, but when I started in my product marketing leadership role at Bill, the first thing we did was write down the charter of the team, the roles, the mission, what do we do, who are the team members, what are the metrics, how do we work with other teams, how are we going to evaluate success? And that's number one. So just writing it down, because even the team itself was not, there was like new set of people who came together, and without that centralized sort of, vision, mission, all that fun stuff, it's really hard to function and set expectations with your cross-functional stakeholders. The second was, I would say, go on a listening tour with all of your stakeholders and, go ask them, hey, what do you want out of the team? And what are you getting and what are you not getting out of the team? And so much of what we do in marketing, content marketing, product marketing, demand gen, is cross-functional, especially in a larger organization. Without that listening tour and having an honest, open discussion, you're not going to get that far. So I would almost like think of cross-team meetings or calendars as more the tactics, but you got to start with that strategic thinking about how you're going to work together. And that all starts with the RACI, right? So some people call it DACI, RACI, whatever your framework is. So that's at the end of the day, sort of how you sort of work together. I will also say that a lot of teams, and you tell me if you agree or disagree, don't have a strategic narrative for their business.
Oh, yeah. I totally agree. And it's funny, when you were talking, I was thinking to myself, I think companies could really benefit from having a go-to-market charter. Like, I love that for the team having a charter, but I think there should be an overarching go-to-market charter where we're laying out what everybody's doing. I think that would be super helpful. So exactly to your point.
Yeah. And I found, writing down the strategic narrative for the business, and it's a little bit confusing. I don't think a lot of people have written down strategic narratives in marketing. So what does that even mean? It means seeing the hurdles to growth objectively and clearly from a business's perspective.
I like that. Yeah.
And having a clear articulation of how you're going to, cross those hurdles, not from the perspective of a particular team, but from the perspective of the business.
Yep.
When you have a clear strategic narrative, that allows each team to, sort of build or imbibe the best from that, and then tailor it to their specific strategies and tactics. So, a strong CEO, a strong, CMO, a strong CRO would really sort of help you with writing that strategic narrative. And if you don't have that, it's going to be a rough road.
Yeah, I agree. And again, I think that fits inside of this go-to-market charter. I think all of that fits inside of a go-to-market charter. If we were to think about, as a company, mapping all that out, who owns what, where are the hurdles, who's going to solve the hurdle, how are they going to solve the hurdle, I think that's a fantastic living document that you would have all your team heads speak to and think about, once a month, just revisiting that and making sure that's staying current. On top of that, I love that. And I think that's probably, at that stakeholder level, probably the fastest way to break down the roadblocks between the teams.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, that's huge. Okay, so we are starting to wrap this up. I cannot believe we've been together for 45 minutes already. This went very fast. Lots of good stuff here. I've got my own personal notes. I think that were super helpful here. We're going to go into the live Q&A. I don't know if we have any questions from the audience to throw up to right now. I do know that one of the questions that I was asked before this whole thing started was specifically, and I've mentioned it as an example a couple of times, is who writes the case study, Pranav? That's what question that I actually had somebody ask me, like, find out who's supposed to write the case studies.
Whoever understands the customer the best.
That is a very diplomatic answer. Who is that usually?
I mean, honestly, again, I would say that hopefully that is your product marketer. And the reason I say that is I also think of one of the key responsibilities that the product marketing team should have is ongoing customer research. And that's a very sort of opinionated point of view, but if you as a product marketer is not spending time with customers all the time, like literally getting out of the building, going and seeing them in person, what are you even doing as a product marketer? Yeah. So I think product marketing is a great sort of starting point. I will say that content marketers are probably 10x better at bringing the story to life. So I see that as a partnership between PMM and content, where PMM's doing sort of the legwork in, eking out sort of the key questions, but then handing it to a content marketer to bring it to life as a story, as a narrative, right? PMMs may not necessarily be skilled at that. They could be, but that's not sort of the core skill set that I think you hire for when you hire a PMM. So, yeah.
I love that. I love that as a partnership. And it kind of goes back to what you had said earlier, which is the product marketing team is the team of proof. Mm-hmm. They're the team of facts. So if you were to say, okay, as a product marketing team, I think we need a case study around this topic. Here's the proof. Here are the facts of what this customer realized. And then you hand that off to the content marketing team and they create this beautiful storytelling around it. I love that. I think that should be the gold standard going forward for how we create case studies.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like imagine if you had at scale a templatized version of this, right? If you're churning out 20, 30, 50 case studies a year, you've got these 5 to 10 standard questions for, product marketers to take to their audience. Mm-hmm. They go out there, they do those interviews, they record it, do a gong call, and the transcript, put that in front of the content marketing team, let them go to town.
Yep, I love it. I absolutely love it. Okay, I think I see one question here. It's up on the screen. Thank you, Jake. What could be other key marketing strategies for a product apart from inbound organic? Because in the starting phase of product, we need some immediate results. What could be those immediate strategies?
Marketing strategies for a product apart from inbound organic. Okay. When you're starting off, and I can share this from my last 2 years of experience, I started selling on day one. Okay. And, what that means is, again, this might be different for different products. For the product that we build, this is for CMOs and CFOs. It's a high price product. And for that, there's no good alternative to sales as a starting point. So, one-on-one outbound sales is your best way to start making some traction. Now, if I were to change my answer and say, let's talk about $10 a month SaaS service, you would argue that one-on-one would not work, right? But if you take a step back and think about it, it actually works because you just have to get your first user to pay $10. So my thought process there would be you stand up a landing page for whatever the offer is. You go talk to 100 people one-on-one, and you see if you can get at least 1 or 2 of them to sign up for that. So to me, it all comes down to when you're starting off, you are pretty well positioned as a sales-led motion, whether it's a $10 a month product or $100,000 a month, a year product. And there's no better alternative to doing that type of work early. There is an exception. If you're a genius in consumer marketing and you can figure out the right copy and marketing that you can put, in the App Store or, on Google Ads, go for it. You just have to be ready to put some money behind it. And then the last is product-led growth. There are some products that started from just an extremely amazing experience and the virality that's built in. You don't need marketing in the sense that that's your product is your marketing, right? What I mean by that is people forget that the 4 P's of marketing, right? One of them is product. And if you have an incredible product, that is your marketing. That is part of your marketing mix, right? Your product. And in tech, we don't think like that. We think of product and marketing as 2 different things. But if you go and study the classics, you go read Philip Kotler, what does he say? He talks about the marketing mix, and product is part of it.
Right. And I'm going to add to that too. I think I'm going to add, which something, Pranav, we could almost say that you did founder-led growth. I think that's a really great way to start out too, is to have your founder, if they are so inclined as you were, so you have so much marketing knowledge. It's a perfect fit for you and for Paramark, for you to be out there doing growth. And then the other one that I would suggest to somebody starting out is nearbound. So, which is like partner-led growth, where you're actually partnering with complementary services. You're piggybacking on their existing audience because you have such a good product market fit with their thing. So that's another thing I would pursue if I were starting out as well, as who are the companies out there that you can partner with and piggyback your offering to their audience. So I think we're going to jump now into our resources. We've got some resources here that you can go and look at if you want to find out more about product marketing, content marketing, demand gen. There's some additional resources here. I believe Jake is going to share this deck with the audience so that all of these are linked so you can go and find them. And then finally, let's keep this conversation going. Make sure you stay in touch with Pranav. He's posting every day really relevant content for demand gen teams. I mean, I don't know if you want to be, but I think if you're a demand gen person, they should 100% be following you, no doubt about it. And then we've got our September webinar happening next month on the 3rd Tuesday. And then, of course, please sign up at the Juice. This is all for them. Sign up for them and get all this kind of marketing content. I know Paramark is part of the Juice as well, right? So your content is being distributed through there. So that's, if you want to see everything that Pranav and Paramark have ever done, you can go and find all of that information on the Juice. And I think that's it. We did it.
This was fun, Theresa.
It was fun, and I took notes. I hope that the audience took notes. Lots of really great value. I am probably going to watch this one again, Pranav.
Yeah, me too.
All right. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate you spending some time with us today. Again, check the chat. We'll make sure that we share this deck with you. All of it is cited, and so if you want to get any of the resources that we shared, you'll be able to do that then. So thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Theresa.
All right, bye.